Probably has like.
Is consideration of the July 17th, 2024 meeting. Dee previously sent those to us. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion approved, yeah.
Second.
Any discussion? They look awesome to me as usual. Thank you, Dee. Yes.
Can you repeat again the title of the meeting and everything, because she started recording after you were gone.
Sure. This is the Town of Belgrade Comprehensive Plan Review Committee. It is August the 21st and we are meeting in the Belgrade Town Office. So, if there's no further discussion, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. The second item on our agenda is the discussion of existing and future land use chapters, policies and strategies. I just included future land use. I know that's not really the focus, just in case we had some feedback from our friends on the planning board. I assume that you all got a copy of the existing land use chapters or the first draft of that.
We're trying to do both today.
Okay,
That's,
all right. So, let's start with existing land use. That sort of makes sense. So did you folks have any thoughts about the existing land use chapters as currently drafted?
I have a number of suggested additions and edits. Things that are missed, but I'm not sure they're worth talking here. I could provide them in writing at a later time as track changes. The things like in the list of ordinances, the multifamily residential ordinance is not listed. Another item that I have a question about is there's a reference to the permit tracking system. As far as I know, that's been discontinued. Because of cost, possibly other reasons. Things of that nature.
Yeah.
In addition to, I have some suggestions for the issues for further study and discussion.
So, George, you just mentioned something I wasn't aware of. So we're no longer tracking.
We
permits?
don't use iWork.
But we are tracking.
In what sort of way?
I've got a spreadsheet that they all get listed on. And like our septic permits are now all being uploaded to the Access GIS system, so they're available to the public. I've been doing some building permits, but our building permits range from a swimming pool, a patio to a new house or a new garage, so that makes a lot of work, or sometimes just a little bitty thing, like a deck, which might be done all in 3 years and expanded or converted into a portion of the house, so. Building permits are not really my priority, but the septic, I'm trying to get as much of that loaded as I can, so we do track it internally. There is a database of them, and they are being uploaded.
So when you say they're being uploaded to the Access GIS, so that will give us the capability to know where development is occurring?
No, it is not tracking permits in a geographical way. I mean, there's map and lot numbers on the spreadsheet. We could, sort by map lot number and identify that way.
Well, other
I'm
than,
not sure iWork did that either, because iWork was basically a database of correspondence.
well, if we're trying to direct development in a certain area of town, let's say, then how do we know that that's actually occurring?
Well, again, we can track map and lot numbers in those parts of town. Because. Well,
So was cost the reason why that was discontinued?
no, it was cumbersome.
It was not useful.
It was cumbersome. It was just a database of correspondence which they owned. You know, right now, we're keeping everything in-house. We're not paying for storage. We're not paying for extra modules every month to maintain access to these documents.
So the public does have access then to permits to see, to track sort of where they are in the process
No,
or what's being developed in their neighborhood or?
no,
Well, it seems to me now there's less transparency than there was before.
well, I didn't realize the public could log into iWork.
Yeah,
No, that was by password only.
no, you can, there's actually a public function in that.
Okay, well,
But if you go on the GIS map and you put in your address, you would be able to look at information on all of the properties around you.
But would that include building permits or what's?
If they're uploaded, yeah.
if they're.
All the
uploaded,
tax
the
cards are
public
there.
is using it, they're coming in all the time.
Are they being uploaded?
Yes,
Yeah, I just went through that.
Okay,
Ian just went through, it took him 3 months.
well, I mean, I
Upload
guess,
all of
I
our
guess I'm just
tax
confused, Hans, because I just asked, does the public have a way to sort of see what's developing in their neighborhood or whatever, and I thought you said no.
I did say no, because if, for me, if the public is gonna see where the growth areas are, it means there should be a chart, something that shows new permits, and we don't have that, we don't have a. You know, they can't open a module and all the new permits in the past 6 months pop up, there's no way to sort
But
like.
they can do that in any vicinity in town, they could look at it.
Yeah, you can log in and see what your neighbors have for a septic permit, where it's located and so on.
Okay,
I mean, they're not all up because I'm having to go through records. To go through building permits and do this, it's gonna take a couple of years, if somebody was dedicated to it. So,
so currently we're only uploading septic systems or just all permits?
septic systems and some bigger projects,
What would you consider to be a bigger project? Like would a home be a bigger project?
exactly.
Okay. But a shed would not?
Yeah.
Okay,
Would you say we have more information uploaded to our GIS mapping system right now than we did previously in iWork?
Yes, because
Yeah.
iWork was just new documents were being saved.
Right.
Whereas I've gone through. I've created. Basics of files that have all the septic permits going back to the late 90s. And most of those have been uploaded that were in the PDF format. We used to have a lot in the Word format. I converted some and uploaded them as I come across, I reference them. I do convert PDF and upload them.
okay, sorry to get us off track, Sarah.
That's okay. Is there any way that your spreadsheet of, permits and, work that has been done around the town and land use can be posted in the website, in our website, just a spreadsheet? And we can update that, let's say, every 2 months? And that's something that is,
Yeah, we can post anything online. Yeah, I've got the past 4 years in a spreadsheet. And all of those permits, I've gone back and created links to the permit, so you can click on it. And it'll open up for you. But it is not posted on our website. Again, this is all behind the scenes,
Yeah,
stuff I do in my spare time.
so if it were posted on the website and a citizen clicked on the link, would they be able to access it? I mean, is it on a server versus?
Yeah, it's on
Okay,
the U-Drive.
okay. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think more transparency is good.
So, but what we're talking about, you wanna know what zone people are developing and, hit me between the eyes last week that our growth area, a lot of it runs in tandem with our aquifer area. And I'm not sure if this has been discussed in the past or not.
Nope, we haven't touched on changing the growth areas yet,
Okay,
but we need to. Change them, keep them, what's been done in them.
because I would say 50. 70, 80% of our growth corridor. I'm sorry, yeah, about 50% runs under the aquifer.
Yeah.
So. Or runs over the aquifer.
What other comments do people have about the existing land use chapter? It's really not supposed to be very data heavy, there's not a lot of specifics, it's just a general kind of overview of what the land is being used as currently. Really, any of those other specifics should be going in the other kind of relevant chapters.
Oh, go ahead, George.
Well, I was gonna just, in that regard, you know, for example, I thought the characterization, of North Belgrade lacked a lot of information, like, for example, it doesn't acknowledge that, you know, we have a major lumber mill over there now. And aspects like that, so, you know, it's a very much of a mixed development type of area right in that crossroad. And this portrays it differently, so there are things like that that I could suggest, but,
Yeah, I mean, any suggestions like that are very helpful.
I mean, overall, I thought it was fine. Most of my questions and suggestions actually have to do with the map. But you know, at the end of that chapter, there's an item, issues of further study and discussion, and there are a number of things that, questions that at least I would raise.
Well, why don't you go ahead and touch on those?
Well, first off, the third bullet, that I kind of take issue with, is the new commercial development, that new businesses are not really new businesses, and they're just inhabiting existing buildings. That's just not what we're seeing at the planning board. The commercial development, and these are the largest of the large non-residential developments, are primarily entirely new lots being developed, with a few exceptions in the village, and they are very much the exceptions. The other thing, and now I'm operating from memory because I didn't know how I could access this information digitally, but if you look at the projects we've approved since I've started on the planning board in 2015, 6 are in growth areas, 6 are not. So that's, you know.
Those are commercial developments.
Yeah,
we're talking about?
so, you know, growth development, the growth, nothing's happening in terms of directing growth into growth areas.
So, so how do you think we can change that?
Well, the commercial development review ordinance is not the solution. As far as I'm concerned, that ordinance is an abysmal failure. Because the premise of it is to allow commercial and industrial and other non-residential development in amongst residential development or in residential neighborhoods and attempt to mitigate the impacts. And I don't think it's been successful in doing that. And so, I mean, I've never been a big fan of zoning, but I think zoning is the only way you're gonna resolve the incompatibilities between certain types of commercial development, industrial development, and residential development. I mean, Belgrade is basically, as this, you know, chapter lays out, is a rural residential town. It's not a commercial hub, it's not an industrial hub. And it doesn't have the infrastructure for either of those.
Well, I made a similar note on my copy, George, on page 2, under the subheading residential land uses. And there's a sentence there that says, Belgrade currently does not have zoning requirements that would control what types and uses of structures could be developed in town. And what I wrote was, I wonder if we should also note that without those sort of requirements, commercial development has occurred in close proximity to residential homes, I think, which is the observation that you had, that there's not much of a buffer between, if a commercial development locates in a residential area, between the homes and the businesses.
Right, no, that's absolutely true.
By doing that, you're taking away people's rights and their land.
At the same time, you're protecting people's rights and land.
Yeah, so say so far, what are you protecting from?
Well, I think, Craig, most people, given their druthers, would rather not have a commercial business located next door to them. that people would prefer that if there's gonna be something located next to them, it be another home. As opposed to a commercial development, because commercial developments are more obtrusive. It's the very reason why we have a commercial development review ordinance.
which is, to me, seems to be working fine. It's a pretty rigid ordinance to go through. That provides safety mechanisms and everything else for the people beside.
I agree with you that it is rigid, but I understand George's point too, that it still does not provide much of a buffer between those commercial activities.
And just for clarification, you know, it's sort of like what ends up on the ground. You know, the permit application aside, all the submissions you know, at the end of the day, it's what gets developed and what's it look like when at the end of the day. And a lot of them look like junkyards. You know, I mean, you can see them all around town and that have commercial development review approval. And, you know, part of that's the blame lies with planning boards, past and present, and code enforcement officers in the past, you know, but part of it is the fault of the ordinance itself. The premise on which it's based is, in my opinion, somewhat faulty.
Yeah, well, you know, this has been, subscribed to Yogi Berra. He probably didn't actually say it, but there's a difference between, theory and practice is that, in theory, it should work, in practice, it doesn't. You know, and so it was a good idea perhaps, but maybe it hasn't been as effective as everyone initially thought it would be when the ordinance was
I
adopted.
mean, maybe it would work, and if you had growth areas that were intended to be from the get-go, mixed commercial residential, not
Right,
residential,
right.
and you know.
But even those mixed commercial residential areas would be, the nature of the commercial businesses would be sort of a soft touch.
Yeah,
So, you know, like.
So where would you guys suggest zoning commercial?
So, I'm sorry, say again.
Where would you suggest?
I
just
got
zoning
it,
commercial?
this is not
Yeah,
a today thing.
yeah,
We've
yeah.
got a lot to get through. We've got 2 chapters to go through in our entire public participation event to plan. So I know zoning's a big issue, but we gotta keep going. One thing I really don't know much about in Belgrade is subdivisions. Have they happened? Where are they happening? If they're not happening?
I'd like to make a comment about subdivisions because
Mhm.
I had a conversation within the past week that I found surprising. And so I was doing some research. I was talking to some engineering firms that, you know, to get pricing and things for a possible subdivision plan for a client, and they gave me a price of something like, and they don't want me to mention who they are. But it was more than one that I got this from, so they said 30,000, but then when they heard it was Belgrade, they said 50 to 60.
Mhm.
Because it's so difficult to get a subdivision through here. They were gonna double the price.
Why?
I don't know, maybe we should look at,
I-
maybe we should do like a questionnaire to people who are involved in subdivisions, whether they're like a surveying company or engineering companies, and say, how could Belgrade be, you know, how can we make it more easier for this to happen here? Because I think that that's what we were talking about, is making housing be able to be here, and maybe even some affordable housing. And if everybody that I'm talking to has that not here view, then
So let me ask you
we've
a
got a
question.
hurdle.
Was the developer from around here? Or-
It wasn't a developer. I worked with a couple of different developers in different parts of Maine. And there was this one who was looking at doing something here, so I've worked with several surveyors, engineering companies, and that so forth, and I was very surprised.
See, we have a pretty stout subdivision ordinance, and we have a pretty stout commercial ordinance. And so without taking rights away from people, those ordinances are working. It's very expensive to get a subdivision in Belgrade, and it's very expensive to build a subdivision. So why would you? It's like, there's one person in town right now, and he's buying up old subdivisions that are already permitted. And, you know, so we're already protecting our land and people without zoning. And so to take away the rights of people in their land just to satisfy other people's needs isn't the.
Well, Craig, now, to be fair, you did that when we approved the solar regulations as part of the commercial development review ordinance. What's the difference?
What's that?
You took away people's rights to lease their land to a solar developer.
No, we didn't. They just gotta do
Oh,
it in a stout way.
yeah,
So
you,
what about the subdivision ordinance makes it so hard to get through?
Yes, that's I would, thank you.
What, I mean, I'm loosely
The
familiar with state
engineering and the
subdivision, what about?
planning and. So that's it.
It's, you know, it's happening in other towns. I'm working with these same people in other towns and we're getting it through. So it was specifically Belgrade.
What,
I'm just saying we should
So Sarah and
find
then
out
George.
why. We should find out why.
so I mean, I'm curious to understand what aspect of the engineering development or crafting, double the price. Why will double the price?
It was the engineering, but I guess because it's so difficult.
Because, well, it might be because of the landscape.
No, no,
and
no,
The lakes around.
It was specifically what you have to go through to get it approved.
I-
Like
Like,
stormwater,
Okay.
wastewater,
Yeah,
that kind of
but I
thing?
have to tell you, I've heard that in every single community I've ever lived in, work, that the planning board is just impossible to get something through, every single community.
I didn't tell him what community it was when he first gave me the price of 30,000, but then when I said Belgrade.
Yeah, I'm just saying, color me.
Sorry, so I'm just think this is something that we should be aware of.
I'd be interested in pinning down exactly what this developer, find difficult here.
It's not the developer, it's the engineering firm that helps the developer to get
so-
the.
Any feedback would be really
Well,
helpful.
that's why I said maybe we should poll people who are affiliated with that, whether surveyors,
I
engineering.
guess something we have to
companies.
consider for our future land use, this is a little off track, is our subdivisions even something Belgrade wants? Regardless, affordable housing is not a very appealing, Belgrade's not really appealing for affordable housing. We don't have the infrastructure, transportation. It's just, I feel like it'd be a very
I
hard
don't think
sell
we're
for.
talking about affordable,
You mean
affordable
like
in that
workforce. affordable.
workforce,
Okay.
affordable. We call that something different, right? What, but.
Yeah.
There's a lot of names for everything,
Yeah,
George,
A little background first off on the subdivision ordinance, KV cog did it for us. It's based on a statewide model ordinance. So there are a fair number of other towns in the state of Maine that have ordinances very similar. So we need to be sure, when we're talking costs, we're comparing apples with apples. That it isn't Belgrade and Mount Vernon that doesn't have an ordinance that meets the statewide minimum. Okay, so let's make sure we're comparing apples to apples if we're gonna get into costs. In terms of, what's happened, at least since I've been on the board in this last stint of mine, since 2015, when I retired. We've only approved one subdivision and it was a minor subdivision, 3 lots. I don't know the reason for that. Maybe it's cost. And maybe there's no demand, not sufficient demand, for a new subdivision because I know it, when I worked on the 2014 comprehensive plan, at that point in time, there was a glut of undeveloped subdivision lots still left over from the big subdivision surge of the late 1980s that I was on the planning board back then. We approved subdivisions, it seemed like weekly, every 2 weeks. And are there still undeveloped lots in existing subdivisions? I think that's a legitimate question. because maybe it has to do with demand. It may have to do also with that people are less interested in living in subdivisions than they once were. You gotta look at the demand side too, and the supply side, if we're gonna talk about, the market.
Yeah, well, I think the subdivision ordinance was redone in 2021.
Yeah, 21, I think
And,
that's right.
and so if there's only been one minor subdivision from 2015 to 2021, then maybe it's not the cost that's
Well, I don't know,
discouraging.
I mean, you could argue that maybe some people decide to, land speculators decide to go somewhere else and.
But I guess the point I'm raising is that subdivision ordinance was what, like 30 years old when we updated it?
Oh, yeah, it was from 1998.
And so the regulations
From
could not have been laxer.
1989.
Could not have been laxer.
It was it was a subdivision ordinance that I worked on my first stint on the planning board in 1988.
So,
Yes, I need a-
I did have a question about land use trends that Hans, I think you can answer. There's a sentence that reads, new development in Belgrade has been minimal over the past several years, and I wondered if that's accurate, because I thought we'd seen a fairly significant uptick in
Yeah, it
in
was
building permits.
stable through, I guess, 2020. We had 87, year before that 84, and then 21, it jumped up to 104. And it stayed right around 100 since then, and we're on track to do probably in the high 90s this year.
For new homes,
Just building permits, period, decks, pools, sheds, yurts, you name it.
so that doesn't indicate new homes, so.
No,
Not necessarily.
but I've got it coded now, so I can, at the end of the year, pull out new homes versus accessory structures.
And I do have the permits in the housing chapter, so that's, again, the data is in another place, this is just glossing over.
And in the land use regulation, this might be something that may relate to recommendations for the housing chapter or the future land use chapter. But, we have several ordinances that are decades old that probably need to be,
Yeah, we have a
Updated.
recommendation for updating ordinances.
well, but should it be specific? As I guess what I'm wondering.
I mean, if they all need to be updated, it's
I mean, I don't know that there's a need to update the adult business ordinance, but the manufactured home and mobile home park ordinance is 34 years old and. Maybe at some point we do anticipate seeing more of that sort of development in the community.
So, if I could just finish the issues of further study.
Oh, I'm sorry, George.
It's okay.
Go ahead.
It's the Belgrade way, wander all over the landscape. We've already talked about the issue of where to expand and encourage mixed residential commercial development in the future. My last bullet is that I would suggest as something for discussion is the challenge that the lack of sewer and public water infrastructure poses for denser development in the village and the depot and places like that. Given that we're dependent on private drinking water supplies, wells. I would just note at one point, Belgrade Lakes Village was on the state priority list way back in the 1980s for a sewer system, but I think the combination of people upgrading their septic systems and putting in holding tanks sort of negated the need for state funding at that point in time. Anyway, I don't know if anything's happened since then, but that's sort of ancient history. But at one point, back when the Hoolan Road was referred to as Skunk Alley and things like that, it was very much on the radar of the DEP.
So I had two thoughts. One is on the minimum lot size ordinance. I mean, the planning board has discussed at times relaxing some of the regulations in the minimum lot size ordinance in order to allow for some more commercial development in the village because it's already landlocked. Is that something that you folks think should be a potential recommendation to at least explore that possibility in order to open up some more opportunities for development in the village?
My personal opinion is not unless there's a public sewer and public water.
Because of
I don't think that
Because of the
peninsula can
drainage.
withstand it,
Because of the strain it would put on septics.
because of the contamination we cause in people's private drinking water supplies. The groundwater there, and I only know this from my work at DEP, because of the cleanup that was done at Dave's store when their underground tanks came out of the ground. Our hydrogeologists determined that the groundwater basically, and this is kind of self-evident, groundwater goes from Mill Stream to Long Pond through the very porous overburden that's that peninsula consists of. And that in fact goes as far as up to the golf course, because there was another cleanup that had to be done on Lakeshore Drive when 4 or 5 wells were contaminated with gasoline. And the groundwater moves at a pretty good clip, so the other issue besides the risk to private drinking water supplies would be the risk to Long Pond.
Okay, fair enough. What about at least considering relaxing the requirement for off-street parking? Especially since a parking lot is being developed there.
It's very tight park. It's very tight even driving through the village now.
But that's typical in any village,
Yeah.
Booth Bay, Bar Harbor, you take any village. Go down to Yarmouth, down, they're all tight.
All tight.
That's Freeport. Freeport might be a little bigger now, but any village, so any typical village. So, to me, I'm not really concerned with. The tightness at all, it's just tight, it's tight, well,
This is where
we're coming up with some parking. You know. Coming into a village. You know, I would like to see small businesses in there, and I would like to see. You know, we're working on parking, but. It's kind of is what it is in the village.
You know, I'm not I wasn't criticizing. I think that's a good thing. It slows things down,
Yeah.
brings people in. You know, the streetscape has worked. Lighting, the new parking, I think 50 sites up at the other end of the village green is gonna help.
I think so as well.
And I guess my perception was with the minimum lot size ordinance, just because of the square footage that's required for any sort of commercial endeavor there, along with the requirement for off-street parking, almost sort of eliminates any new commercial development there, even a small retail business or some such.
To answer my own thoughts to go along with Craig's is on the parking question, you know, could it be relaxed, for example, in the commercial development review ordinance? Because it's not really an issue in the minimum lot size per se, but maybe, but I'm not sure how you know, what that would look like. The thing to keep in mind, though, also is to the extent that part of that peninsula is in the shoreland zone. Shoreland zoning, which we have no control over because it's of the state minimum ordinance, has minimum lot size standards that, you know, regardless of what changes we might make to the town's ordinance would still be in play.
Right.
Likewise, parking too.
The state shoreline zoning ordinance is gonna be changing in the next year or two. Just so you guys know. The 2015 regulations were never made mandatory, they found out. So the state's gonna be fixing that little issue and updating it and, so I mean, I think any changes would probably be ideal to wait until after that comes through the pipes,
You said when's gonna happen, I'm sorry?
next couple of years. Like it's in progress now, from my understanding.
Yeah. I know a lot of it's to deal with the aftermath of the storms.
Mhm. They're running into issues with the floodplain mapping.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
50 years old.
a representative from DEP actually met with the planning board this past winter to discuss shoreline zoning, do some training for us, and, he mentioned, that they would be probably making some changes, but mostly with regard to storm damage.
Okay, so let me ask a much broader question. What do you guys think that the plan ought to include as suggestions? Not that we do it necessarily, but maybe that there's some exploration. What are some things we as a community should be exploring in order to encourage more development, whether it be residential and or commercial?
I don't know if we need to encourage it, I don't wanna see it built up. But I want people to be able to use their properties as they wish. So. I don't know, encouraging
But do you think,
is
Greg,
actually something that I, you know.
but do you think though that, for instance, we need more smaller homes so that seniors can age in place as opposed to or more smaller homes that's gonna encourage some young families to live here in town?
That's generally, the market will decide that, and
Well, that's what I'm saying. The market already has. I mean, there's not. I mean, people can't afford to do that here, so.
Yeah,
well, the reason why they can't afford it, well, there's property values around the lake have shot up.
Sure.
Those have shot up, but other than that, it's not. It's everything else. It's the cost of materials, it's the cost of labor, it's the cost of groceries. The cost of groceries, because this family of four, whose father is a building contractor, needs to make more money to feed his family. So everything's going up, so it's more expensive to put a driveway in, it's more expensive to put power in, it's more expensive to buy your materials, it's more expensive for the concrete, it's more expensive for everything all the way through. And it's because of what the economy is doing. It takes more money to live. So us doing those houses need to make more money. So it's costing the driver, driving the cost of the house up.
So why do you think there aren't more smaller homes being built in town?
You know, back before 2008. And you can go down in my subdivision and look, big homes. And that's what people were doing. When 2008 hit, all of a sudden, everybody shrunk down into smaller homes. One story, not these big colonials. And that lasted for many years. And then all of a sudden, it started sneaking back up into bigger homes. It's whether people making more money in the stock market, driving it. A lot of people moved here from COVID that made a lot more money in the houses from wherever they were from. And so they're building bigger houses again. It's just the way it works.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned that there's not more stock of smaller homes where people. Like, you know, if you, as you grow older, if you want to age in place, then, you know, there's no small home necessarily that you.
Well,
can
drive
move
around the
into.
countryside.
Do the amenities that Belgrade offers, do they foster people staying in place as they get older? With the lack of full-time fire and rescue, no police, no public water sewer, I mean, all those would factor into
I
that.
don't think that's fair. We have full-time fire and rescue. So we have
We have two in a contract ambulance.
we have, well, I mean, but it's more than most towns have as far as rescue go. I mean, we have rescue personnel on duties 7 days a week. And, you know, in the state, you know, we don't have police, but the state police and sheriff's department seem to do a fine job patrolling, keeping the peace in our community, so.
I think it's more of what you're talking about would be more of a subdivision where it's a developer that makes it so that they don't have to mow their lawns, things are taken care of, and there's several, like in Oakland, people have to move to Augusta, Waterville, wherever for that, and it's generally what we would consider a necessity of having a subdivision to create that type of living arrangement for the older who want to stay in place. So if we can't get subdivisions through, that's not gonna happen.
So we've heard from one planning board member says, yeah, I'm not really concerned about us having more development. I'm just curious. I mean, do you two feel sort of the same way, or do you think we should be encouraging, or? I mean, I don't think we want to discourage it, do we?
Just before your hand goes numb.
Well, I have to go to the chair.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Right? So, I think the biggest problem right now is how the real estate is just going crazy. A piece of land here costs a tremendous amount of money. And so added to that, because our land is so valuable, the taxes are high too. And our biggest taxes go to the ISU. So I have heard this story for years, 10, 15 years, that people live here all their life. They work in Augusta, come and live here, and when they have to retire, they have to move out here because they cannot pay the taxes. So that's a big issue that I'm working on with the ISU and with the DOE. And right now, the state is rebalancing the funding formula.
Right.
And then the union of the 5 towns that we have in RSU, that we're gonna have to renegotiate our fiscal responsibility there. So I think that's a big impact. That's the main reason why right now Belgrade is not attracting new families, and all of them are going to Sydney. The
So-
taxes are low.
So,
I don't think.
yeah, well, and that is a good one, because Sydney offers like zero.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Services. I mean, they do plow roads and they have a
Yeah.
transfer station, but other than that,
But they pay for the kids, $6,000 per child going to schools, and we pay 16 per child.
so, but let's get back to the question of development. Should we be encouraging it, discouraging it, or remain
So
neutral?
you're trying to, the conversation is leading to the concept that maybe we should change the minimum lot size. But there's a fine balance there, and that's one at least that through the time I've been in the planning board, I'm not gonna touch. You know why? Because the reason why the lakes here are healthy is because we have hold on the line on that, on the minimum lot size. The moment we start fracturing that, then we're gonna compromise the land,
Okay,
the water.
so my question again is there anything sort of big picture that we should be doing to encourage development? George?
I'm not sure I have a particularly good answer to that question, but answer your earlier question, should we be encouraging development in general or certain types of development? My personal view is we should be encouraging commercial development, but in the right places. And let the market take care of the rest in terms of demand of what kinds of houses and, size, big, small, big lots, cluster developments, whatever. And so that's what I think we should be encouraging, and I think we need to take control of our future and manage the land use overall on our terms as a community, rather than leaving it just to the whims of.
If you don't have a plan, you get what you get.
Huh?
I said, if you don't have a plan, you get what you get.
Yeah, and so, I don't,
So when you talk
I'm
about,
not a land use planner, so I don't know what all the tools are for accomplishing those two goals. But what I've seen in the news media for, the more developed southern portion of the state. And in other states, it seems like it comes down to 2 types of tools. One is economic incentives of some sort. That could be construction of infrastructure. It could be, subsidies, as in the case with affordable housing. And I'm sure Grania, knows of many more than I do. And on the flip side is the regulatory side of having, some broad-based zoning. I'm not a big fan of the kind of zoning that, because I grew up in a town that had this, where, you know, it tells you where you can put your doghouse. But you know, where are our growth areas? That de facto encourages growth, commercial growth to go in those areas. So that's how I see it, you know, there's two sides to it, one's the regulatory side, one's the incentive side, there probably are other tools that I'm ignorant of, but.
And when you talk about some sort of regulation for commercial development, I assume that's to prevent encroachment into residential areas.
Yeah, and that's, there's no standard to that effect. There's no, it's all about, that ordinance is all constructed around attempting to mitigate the worst of the impacts on the surrounding, particularly residential, land uses. If you put a commercial or non-residential, whether that be solar, whether that be an auto repair shop that generates hazardous waste, you know, regardless of what it is, a sawmill, you know, you attempt to mitigate the noise, you attempt to mitigate light pollution, you attempt to mitigate groundwater contamination, you know, it does nothing to try to protect surrounding properties from, the impact on that property values. You know, there's no economic aspect to it in that regard. I mean, it's pretty well. I mean, I actually, you know, as you know, Anthony, I was kind of a pain in the ass about the illegal commercial development that went in next door to me. And, you know, I talked to a couple of property appraisers and they all agree that probably reduced our property value by 10 to 15%. Not unlike if my well had been contaminated with gasoline.
Yeah. So one comment and then Sarah, from you, so that no one gets too worked up about all this. This plan is not regulatory in nature. It's aspiration.
Yes, but the thing with it though, it's a state law that all ordinances need to follow the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan may not be regulatory, but it is. Because what comes out in this plan has to be put into our ordinances.
Well, but Craig, at the same time, you and I both know I mean, we accomplished a lot out of the 2014 plan, but there was also a lot that we didn't accomplish. And so the purpose of the plan is to provide some aspiration about who and what we want to be as a community.
All right,
Over the coming 10 years. So all I'm saying is, this is not regulatory in nature, that we've already talked as a group about, hey, you know what? Our recommendation should be that we have a community conversation about X.
can I say one thing?
Certainly.
Let's take a farm. Let's take a farm, he has a few hundred acres out there. Farming went down, state drove out of business with all the regulatory things, prices drove down to $1 a gallon, 64 cents a gallon, whatever it was at the time, they went out of business. And they were struggling, and the state said, hey, you know, you can put this sludge on your land and whatever, blah, 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 so they provide a little pond there that does nothing, and so all this stuff happens, and in the meantime, this farmer, now you're gonna say, hey, you can't do anything with your land, because that's open space. So not only did the state screw you when you were farming, we're gonna screw you now.
Except, Craig, there's no such recommendation coming from this group.
There's all kinds of recommendations, open spaces, look
The
at your maps.
recommendations that we're making are to encourage people to take advantage of tax programs as specific landowners that,
That's peanuts, you can't survive on a tax break,
no, you can't. It's not even remotely close to helping, but
right? So
as a town,
why would
what can the town do? And that's what the focus of this plan has to be. Is
you let them do what they
build-
want with their property, but use their ordinances to regulate it? Not
And so I think
zone it,
that's
say you can't do it.
I think that's what George was getting at, is that some very loose guidelines could help keep like your situation, some commercial development out of areas where it's not ideal. Or maybe could help steer some residences away from the open space, away from the farmland, so these farmlands aren't attractive to subdivisions. Because the subdivisions shouldn't be taking up farmland, because we need.
So you're missing my point. So these farmers are getting screwed because they can't even they drove farming out, all the small farmers, the state did that, and government did that. They went to bigger farmers,
No, the market did that.
and it was subsidies,
The market did that.
the subsidies
Wasn't
did that.
government.
All these subsidies for these big farmers did that, thank you, and, so now. They can't even use their land to make money off of. Because you want it to be, because you. I want that to be open space,
If he
I
doesn't-
like that as
if he
open
doesn't want it to
space,
be open space, he doesn't have to be. But what can the town?
but that's what you're saying, that's exactly what you guys are saying.
Sarah,
Alright, so I think to Greg's point. The concept is that a lot of people in town here. Understand, and we went through the 2003 of the, okay. The impression in town is that. That all the morphing that we did to our ordinances refer this comprehensive plan. And yet you are stating that is aspirational. Now, but down the road, what's gonna happen? You know, down the road, we don't have control of the state. And then you guys voted in the state, said, oh, now we're gonna, you have your comprehensive plan, we're gonna make it happen. It's not a plan anymore. You selected your growth areas, and right there, we want you to put a building of such and such. To make it, affordable housing for low income. So this is a fear of that in town, that might happen. Because apparently, these are happening in all the areas of the country. So that's a sound, that's not a
that's
fact.
it's an unfounded fear.
The growth.
I'm not sure about that.
No, it is. It definitely is.
You should talk to.
The government is not gonna subsidize low-income housing in Belgrade, Maine. It's simply not going to happen.
Well, that's the only.
Because as she said, there aren't enough support services for that
The management
constituency.
program that actually guides this entire plan is under the gun right now, and they're not making it more strict, they're going the other way.
Hopefully that's gonna happen.
It is, that
The
is.
other portion that I wanna add on.
But this is, we need to kind of focus on our goal here.
Understand, I can agree more with you, Anthony, on the fact that if we don't have a plan. We really lose the chance for it. So we have to plan around our needs. One of the things that I heard over the last year here is exactly what you're pointing out at. We're pointing out, people age here, they work here all their lives, they live here all their life, they age and they have to move out. So we have to come with a concept or a solution to the need of elders in the community, needing probably to leave their homes and live in smaller homes, maybe in a complex that we will set the town, an area in town to make that happen, a complex that will be closer to, at the end of our town, closer to Augusta, so because their services, all of them are gonna be going that way to the hospital and to other services they will need. So I don't know how that can be crafted here and included in the plan for that to happen.
I think that's what he was mentioning about, to get that sort of environment for older people who would like to stay in Belgrade is to have some sort of a subdivision that would have those smaller homes and amenities that
One floor
would be
living.
beneficial, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't, that's what they look for when they are.
Well, like Florida, what, isn't that what they do a lot down south, right? They have those subdivisions, those
Right.
communities for older,
Things
and it
are
has
mowed,
everything.
They
Yeah.
don't have to shovel, like
Right.
it's all,
There's
one-
some
Everything's
gutter
taken
and
care of.
some all-
yeah.
Yeah, so Craig, you had your hand up first.
How many people are getting put out of their houses? Because I know my family, my father had 12 brothers and sisters. My grandmother lived to 90. I have aunts that are currently in their 70s and 80s. They're all living in their houses. So do you have a number on how many people elderly have been pushed out of their houses in Belgrade?
Oh, I don't know that anyone's been pushed out of their house, but at a certain point.
They
Craig,
sell it because they can make money off it, and they go to a house like Granite Estates where they're being taken care of, and it's not being pushed out of their house, it's going for care, is what they're doing. There's also another place in Hollowell, and, you know. It's like. they're not being pushed out.
Well, we're not accusing, we're not saying.
Well, then why are you
Let's push that.
creating a problem of that?
I'm not creating a problem.
Well, it sounds like it's coming up an awful lot, so
Craig,
it's
Craig,
creating a
okay,
problem.
I'm chairing this and we're not gonna get argumentative. George?
I actually just have a basic question, with regard to, both existing land use and, potential future land use. And in the 2014 and its predecessor, Roy Bouchard, who's a lakes biologist, as most of you know, I believe it was his work that was the basis for determining what the maximum build out in terms of impervious surface area, the overall watershed in Belgrade could withstand without generating so much phosphorus that it would, and I don't remember the specifics of what, you know, was it to turn the lakes green, or was it to reduce the clarity by, you know, 1 meter, or what it was, but there was that kind of analysis done, and other towns have done this as well, that are lake communities. And that resulted in both those plans having a goal of maintaining 60% of the watershed in open space. Or I should say, in
Undeveloped.
pervious, in, not in impervious
Yeah.
development. Is anything like that being contemplated?
That's the question I had highlighted on my screen to ask next, is that very metric, that very same metric, is that something that we should have in this plan to try to keep at least 60% of the community as, I always remembered it as undeveloped, but I'm sure you're right that it's.
Well, and it may be impervious area versus undeveloped.
Yeah.
Because those are two different.
And I remember, George, we struggled with, you know, how do we go about measuring that? That was always pretty key, because Hans, do you have any ideas?
Nope.
Well, in the last comprehensive plan, that was one of the rationales for recommending some kind of development tracking system at the town office in an attempt, and, you know, no specific methodology, but I'm sure smart people like Peter Rushton could come up with one, but who are GIS wizards, but
So anyway, so do we think that that's a standard that we should maintain in this plan? Is the question.
I mean, when debating that, as we, with anything else that we've been discussing tonight, there's a cost for doing nothing. And it isn't like doing nothing is free. So in this regard, how much more are we willing to allow the lakes to degrade from phosphorus runoff coming from stormwater in the entire watershed, some of which comes from the shoreline, some of which comes from the rest of the watershed. And you know, right now, if it's a new subdivision, it'll be regulated. If it falls under the commercial development review ordinance, it would be regulated. Anything else, everything else is not regulated though. You know, if I build a house on in my field next door, that's gonna be unregulated in terms of phosphorus and stormwater runoff.
Yeah.
Even though it's in the drainage area for Long Pond.
Yeah.
So, you know, what's the goal for the lakes? You know, is the goal to prevent the clarity to be reduced by yet another meter? Is it, you know, so you gotta start with that and work your way backwards, up to deciding how much phosphorus are we gonna export?
Hans, do you have something?
Yeah, you know, with the work with Charlie Bader, Lynn Geiger, the greatest contributing factor to phosphorus is the camp roads. They're continuous, they're basically sluice. You know, you're creating an avenue for the water to run down, especially if its camp road is plowed, which most insurance companies now requiring access for fire service, even if it's unoccupied. So they're plowing up the ditches. And the only avenue for the runoff is right down the road, which goes to the cabin at the end of the side of the lake. So I'm contrary to the 10 minutes ago, talking about impervious surface. Pavement is your best friend. Pavement's not gonna wash away. Pavement's gonna let clean water go right to the lake instead of taking phosphorus with it.
Well, at a certain point, that pavement doesn't go directly into the lake. At a certain point, the pavement's gonna end, and then that water's gonna have generated enough speed where it's gonna create erosion and runoff.
But again, right now, our practice is put more dirt on it, watch the dirt erode.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. Camp roads are the biggest contributor to phosphorus.
So it's not housing. It's not construction, because those are controlled actions. The biggest uncontrolled action we've got is our road maintenance.
That and the state and towns roads laying sand. There's no reason that we don't have low salt and sand areas. And why is Upper Long Pond lost? Why has their water quality gone down so quickly? Well, it's because we have 27. And we have 27 and they're running up and down the road every 20 minutes, layering stuff on the roads. That never used to be the case, but it's the case now. Great Pond, what do we have around Great Pond? We have Route 8, 11, 225, all built up, all getting layered. Too frequently during a storm. Everybody's so worried about, oh, geez, the middle of a snowstorm, I gotta dove 60 miles an hour down this road. It's, they're just, the state and the town. It's between the calcium that the state's putting down and the sand that the town's putting down. I mean, there's no reason, it was just a few years ago when, they came down, Morris Childs came down. And right beside my house, there's a tiny little brook, and they took 2 dump truck loads of sand out of that brook. That was nothing but road runoff. 2 truckloads. And I went to that Seven Lakes Alliance meeting, she said, oh, as long as it doesn't have dust, it doesn't matter. So all this stuff is happening. And the people that are getting penalized are people with homes. Because everybody's jumping on the phosphorus thing. Well, the homes, yeah, they generate phosphorus, don't get me wrong. But that's limiting them and regulating them to the point where it's so costly, again, driving the price of houses up. And not fixing the real problems and going after the gusto is meaningless to me.
Well, I think, Craig, you've raised an interesting point I hadn't considered before, is maybe because we do have a chapter in this plan on natural resources, of which our lakes are. And so a decision was made by the select board a few years ago to get rid of salt priority on some of the town roads, and that has resulted in more sand being laid on the roads. Do you think that we should encourage the select board to reconsider that policy?
Yes, because why do you need so much sand on the Hewlin Road that it's so dusty when you're driving down there? It's just a dust ball.
Yeah. Well,
It's a 20-mile-an-hour zone.
Yeah.
1 lane, 1.5 lanes. There's no reason for it.
I think that's a recommendation worth considering for the plan, and to me, maybe the natural resources chapter might be a good place to put that, simply because it would help to prevent more phosphorus. An abundance of phosphorus.
And I was just up to this pond, Beach Hill Pond, it's a 1.5 miles out of Ellsworth. I went out and visited some college buddies. And I'm standing on this dock, it's like 6-7 feet there, and I can see every pebble. And I look around, and this whole pond's populated all the way around, and it's like his dock, his deck was 10 feet from the water, and his camp was like 25 feet from the water, and everyone was just like that all the way around. And I'm looking down there, and it's crystal clear water. What they didn't have is a major highway going all the way around the pond.
Yes, sir.
If I could change.
I'll get to you next, Kate.
If I could just ask about the map that we provided.
Yes, please.
Is this intended to represent existing or future land use?
This is current.
Pardon?
This is current. So this was
Correct.
done by our intern. I don't love it, to be completely frank. I'll probably work with it and Joel a little bit more to make it a little bit more
Yeah.
legible.
I would clearly label that because knowing the,
This is for us in this room to make
Okay,
decisions. This is
okay.
not going into the final plan as is.
all right, yeah.
I have some
think
big-
if that's the case, then the only thing I would point out is that White Islands is part of Belgrade.
That white.
Yeah, White Island and Great Pond and I don't know what, and simply that the white areas, I don't know what those are supposed to be, if that's supposed to be woodland or.
I think that may be just outside the town boundaries.
No, the white areas in the outlying town are, I believe, just meant to signify undeveloped land.
Yeah, no, White Island's very much part of Belgrade. Last I knew,
The
it
map-
wasn't
the map I'm
succeeded
looking
into
at
Rome.
This.
Oh, I'm looking at a different map.
Yeah, so I believe you guys are looking at
Yeah,
the,
we're looking at this one.
That's the existing from the.
yeah, that's the
2014.
past comp plan. The group areas. This one,
Yeah.
I only printed a handful of copies.
That's right.
This is the map I was referring to, Anthony.
Yeah.
And I struggled with the maps too.
Yeah, this-
But I didn't know which one it was.
I was trying to compare the two
Yeah, so
maps.
it's this one.
Yeah, that's what I tried.
I bet you're right. I bet that is one.
I can't bring them out.
Yeah.
8.5 by 11.
A little one, not a big one. Do you want me to make some more of these?
Yeah, I mean, if everybody wants one, yeah, no, this is not going in our plan as is.
Okay,
Our intern was wonderful, but he'd never worked with land use or anything
well,
before.
that's fine. I'm not trying to be, I knew the intern had done it. It isn't that I'm trying to be critical. It's just, it wasn't clear to me whether it was intended as future or existing. And-
No, I asked him to make this up so we can look at our existing growth areas that are on this kind of green shaded map. And kind of look at what is there currently to see how we want the growth areas to change, if we want them to change. And then have that discussion.
One thing, maybe this captures it, somewhere, but, it is to consider, all the gravel mining in town. I mean, it's a type of industrial land use.
Yeah,
It can be pretty
yeah,
disruptive.
we touched on that in the natural resources.
But it's, you know, a prominent feature of Belgrade, it always has been. It's a you know, it's here because that's, you know, we have the big Great Pond esker. You mine gravel where you have gravel.
We did touch on that in the natural resources, that it is a
So,
big commercial driver, but it is also a natural resource in a way.
so I don't know that we ever sort of got an answer as to whether or not we think the 60% of, I'll call it pervious surface. I don't know if that's even a word. If that's still a good benchmark for us to include in the plan.
So does anybody know where we're at right now?
We don't know.
Yeah.
I think, George, earlier, when you were chair of the comp plan committee, we were looking at with KV cog to do some aerial flights to kind of determine that impervious amount.
Yeah.
It would trigger a new phosphorus ordinance if we were over it.
Yeah, we did, we had discussions, with regard to whether the existing GIS mapping was adequate to come up with an estimate of. And, it never happened, it never went anywhere, Pat, maybe you know the answer to this, somewhere along the line, I got the impression that Seven Lakes Alliance might be doing something similar.
I don't believe so on the
No.
scale that is needed to really do the whole town.
Okay.
It's been probably talked about, but. it hasn't-
Yeah, I think that's all it's been so far, has been talk.
Yeah.
And a recommendation, based on the recommendation was in the 2014 plan to try to come up with some kind of metric for that. But, and with respect to whether, you know, that should continue, I don't know the answer to that.
So This GIS, map that we have in computer, don't have a, landscape, view.
No, I don't have the, we don't have the topography on these maps. And with the topographic plan.
I'm talking about the one that, Hans has, where we can capture the lot. That doesn't have the landscaping. I thought
If
they,
it's on a, if it's a digital mapping program, it'll have topographic pictures.
I had idea that all that information was in there. I was surprised that he picked that out, like he didn't know how to do that, so I thought that that map allowed to see the topography of the whole land. And then where the houses are located and so on.
Brian, getting back to the
Yeah.
existing land use map, the, given what's being mapped as prime farmland, including what looks like something in Belgrade Lakes Village, you might want to do a little quality assurance on that. It may be just based on soil type
And that's what it is, it's
and
soil type,
versus
it's a
is it
state
really
layer.
used as farmland? And I can't remember the definition that Maine Department of Agriculture has for prime farmland. I know they have one, but, because we had to deal with it when, on the solar stuff. But I think there's it's a twofer, it's soil type and is it actually have been used for agriculture
There
in the
is
last
a
5
state
years?
layer that designates prime farmland, so I believe that's just what.
Anyway.
Our engineer carried.
For what it's
Yeah, it's. Our little baby intern.
What more do you think we need to discuss in regards to land use?
The growth areas?
Cool.
Yeah, so we still need to discuss growth areas as well as all the different components of public participation, if you still guys still wanna have it next month.
Oh, I wanna tell you that, when we did the LD 2003, we as the planning board struggled with that. With that, determining where that was gonna be pinned out. Cause we don't.
Yeah,
What,
growth areas will
the
affect.
growth area?
Right.
Is there, so did y'all settle on one?
No, we, only those areas that I know that they're right now decided are right in here.
Yeah, the planning board isn't able to decide growth areas, it like.
But do the LD 2003 changes in Belgrade have?
Well, that,
They
that's
are
the thing,
affected by what's in a growth.
That-
where those
that
areas-
document that is already in our ordinances refers to this
Oh, I see.
map,
Yeah.
and this map is fluid. So, the members of the planning board had issues with that.
I think that's what Craig was getting at earlier, is that if, as we change these growth areas, it affects what's in the ordinance,
Right.
because the ordinance refers to our growth areas.
So this map really, rules our decisions eventually.
Well, let me ask you the most basic question. Is there any reason to change the current growth areas?
Well, I think like Con said that the majority of them are over the aquifer. It doesn't mean he like doodled on this for me.
Okay, but since we don't have public water and sewer, people are gonna have to have water. Or developments are gonna have to have water, so wouldn't that necessarily require development to be over an aquifer?
I don't know, bedrock wells and ground wells and.
Well, and some of the growth areas, in 2014, the state actually had us expand the amount of growth area that their first review of the draft plan indicated that they didn't think we had identified enough growth area as a community. And so that's why for example, the village growth area was expanded to go up the West Road to the Castle Island Road, across the Castle Island Road, and then back down 27. So those areas don't, necessarily require public water, public sewer, because of the amount of land area available. Because of the golf course, there's only so much land area available, though. So, I mean, one question I have is, have the state standards for how much growth area you need changed and, so consequently, even more than what is currently identified in the comprehensive plan it
I'm
required.
not aware of a numerical amount of growth area that you're required to have, I think it's based off of the reviewer and.
Yeah,
Well, if we have property that has been permitted for subdivisions, should those properties be part of the growth area? Isn't that where we would want housing development, for instance, to occur?
Well, they're already developed.
I know, well, but that's I thought I heard earlier that we have subdivisions that haven't been developed, or subdivisions that have been permitted but haven't been developed.
well, I was asking the question if there was still undeveloped, a large number of undeveloped lots in permitted subdivisions. That was the case in 2013. Is that the case today? I don't.
Well,
know
it
the
would
answer
have to be though, but since if we haven't had any, if we've only had one minor subdivision in,
Well,
in the 9 years that you've.
but
said
it
that.
could also be the cost.
But-
And other market factors.
I know, but what I'm saying though, George, is that if we have property that's been permitted for subdivisions yet hasn't been developed, maybe those properties should be added as growth areas.
Are those permits even?
Why are you shaking your head no, Kate?
Depends on when they were permitted and.
Oh, yeah, I don't think,
If something's been sitting for 20 years,
It's still
what was
there.
allowable 20 years ago, you might cringe at, so maybe they should be voided and.
If they were permitted that long, or would they still have to go back through planning board?
No, because they're still paying taxes on them, they're paying taxes on individual lots, so those permits are still good.
Yeah.
You can't take a permit away from
Right.
somebody. And so, say, take my subdivision, I ended up, 2008 hit, got caught up, I ended up selling some lots off just so I wouldn't have to pay so many taxes, because I was paying, taxes on each individual lots. So it wasn't like I was paying taxes on the piece of land, I was paying 10 different taxes. And I know of one subdivision on the McGraw Pond Road that hasn't been developed, that's probably got 10 places. My subdivision, I only own one lot left in there. But there's there's 3 lots left in there that are all privately owned other than mine. One,
well, it just seems like if those have been already permitted for residential development, that maybe, and they're clustered in some sort of way, that maybe it makes sense to have those added added as growth areas.
yeah,
Yeah.
then you're just taking a small little piece.
Well, and I'm not talking about individual parcels, but let's say that let's say the one that you mentioned on Salmon Lake Road, is that what you said?
McGraw Pond.
McGraw Pond Road. If they've got 10 parcels that have been subdivided, but they've never been developed, then maybe that 10 parcels, so that's gonna be at least 10 acres, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that should be a growth area.
So what's that gonna accomplish?
If we're needing to meet a metric to meet a growth area, then it adds to the yellow and the red right there.
But we don't have a metric, we don't need to.
Well, I thought I just heard George say that our last plan got sent back because the growth area wasn't robust enough.
That's correct.
But do we know if that was because of an acreage or percentage? I don't know,
I think it was, acreage.
okay.
Is
The,
that something you can check, right?
Yeah, I'll check with the state on that. I've never seen a metric. I've never heard of there being like a number figure you have to meet.
I don't recall ever hearing, I mean, I was on the steering committee as well as another subcommittee, but I don't remember hearing what the metric was. Or if it was just some basic guidelines or what it was. It was,
Yeah,
a decision made by the planners that reviewed it at agriculture, forestry and conservation, but.
And theoretically, Craig, I mean, this is not likely to happen, but theoretically, if a developer came to town and said, hey, I'm looking to develop some property where, where are your growth areas? And hey, we've got this 10 plot subdivision that is just waiting to be developed.
So Anthony, to answer your question about should residential subdivisions or be, considered part of the growth area. It wasn't in the existing plan, but I always thought it should be. Because it's, you know, subdivisions are fairly dense development.
Right.
Certainly denser, you know, like the subdivisions off the West Road are a heck of a lot denser than the West Road itself, although
Yeah.
that's changing.
Yeah.
So I would think it would be reasonable to put, but a growth area, a residential growth area versus a commercial growth area. As you move towards the future plan.
Well, in this, the growth area doesn't distinguish between commercial and residential, it's just general development. And even, that's interesting, even that general development's only 1.6% of the, those are the red areas. It's only 1.6% of the, total acreage.
So I guess my question would be is, will you confirm that with this map, will be okay? Or we still have?
If we don't
to change
change the
that?
growth area to single
No,
bit,
can you, for me, in my mind anyways, I will double check it, this map is fine as it is, and we don't have to work on it.
so this map, this green one was the plan, the map that was submitted in 2013 to the state and got an approved comp plan for the town. So this map has the state's blessing, go forth and conquer. What we need to do is decide if these growth areas are. How much they've been developed, if they need to change, where they need to change, that's what we need to decide. And then I'm gonna reach out to the state and ask about a metric, because it's not something I've ever heard of. And maybe they were a little bit bitter about like the state planning office getting. Flushed away and we're just taking it out on comp plan, I don't know. But
I suspect that this whole thing, this whole circle is gonna come back again eventually, and at least for, I would say that, if the state like it, and we don't have to change it, it'll be fine with me. I hear some changes that are gonna happen, or may happen, but,
do we know,
that's my
if
opinion.
the approved subdivision lots are in these growth areas or relatively nearby?
Can you say that again, please?
The subdivisions that are permitted,
Mhm.
that are undeveloped, do we know? Are you guys able to look at this map and tell if they're in these growth areas or if they're relatively close?
So the one you talked about, Craig,
No, it's in it, the one that Craig was mentioning on the Rock Pond Road is not in yellow,
Yeah.
it's.
And then we have the one right. at
It would
the
be
end of the
red.
cemetery, which may
it
be,
would be red, the general development,
Right,
right?
Yeah, but it's in the brown. It's. There's a sharp corner on Rock Pond Road, and it's just to the.
so is my subdivision's in the brown as well.
Is yours on Rock Pond Road too? The one that's close to there?
North Bay Estates on Route 8.
And so it's Tyler Evans, the one that's in the Don Road, is not marked here.
Yeah. So that kind of goes hand in hand with what I mentioned earlier, that I thought those areas should be in the growth area.
But it's hard to put a subdivision required in a growth area, because you're just taking away so many land and you're limiting the amount of people that are gonna do it.
Is there, what's the reason that residential and mixed use district is not part of a growth area?
I don't know.
So I mean, that's the question I have is. If we included. What's in the brown as growth areas, wouldn't that make sense?
Go there.
Why?
I mean, doesn't this have to be approved by the town?
Yes,
This is not gonna pass the town, town's gonna vote it down, that would be my thought.
I don't know what, if we explain, listen, what's now, well. If you just. All you'd be doing, Sarah, is you'd be moving this Browns block up from underneath rural area to growth area.
But the
So,
ground is all the roads, all the town roads.
Is right,
I know, but it's also the residential mixed use district. I mean, wouldn't we want growth to occur along the roads?
Well, George is saying that he'd rather not have commercial development beside his house, so.
okay, I guess, I guess,
Well, and who would?
Yeah,
well,
so what's
What?
mixed,
but that's already occurring though.
what's mixed use defined as?
Right.
Well, mixed use would be a mix of
Well,
residential and
I think you
commercial.
gotta parse this apart, you know, I
Right.
think you gotta have residential,
Growth and commercial growth.
right,
And this map doesn't reflect that.
Different colors,
so I think,
a different color
So we
for
have limited-
commercial
Yeah,
growth,
yeah,
a different
yeah.
color for residential growth.
yeah, versus
Right,
the way it was handled.
distinguish between them.
So the limited commercial district in the shoreline zoning ordinance is kind of your mixed use. It contains mixed use residential, low, medium impact commercial.
so the red ones is exclusively for commercial.
That's not what it says, general
It's just
development.
general development.
So maybe we should,
I would think you would want all of 27 to be for your commercial growth, because that's the major road, it's away from the residential.
One of the issues that weighed heavily in the 2014 plan was to prevent commercial sprawl on Route 27. There was a lot of concern about commercial sprawl just marching up 27. Particularly from the businesses in the village and other businesses in the area that, you know, were tied to the lakes and to the second home and tourism industry. Because they view that as the gateway to Belgrade and didn't want it.
But it didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen,
And there's nothing to, that would
and
have
in
prevented it
fact,
from happening.
one could argue that the commercial development is, you know, getting more intense in Augusta, it's staying there rather than marching up Route 27. But that was the thinking back in 2012, 13.
At least now we have 10 years of experience that,
I mean, my preference, rather than encouraging it or along all of Route 27 is to, as was done back then, is to encourage it in the area, well, this area where the town office is. And the depot at large. So that, you know, with the idea that, and I don't, this was one of the objectives of the current plan, and I don't know if it's gonna be one of the objectives of this plan, but to encourage village type development. So that in the future, the depot in this area of town would, you know, when we're all dead and gone and 6 feet under, look sort of like a village. Versus
And North
just
Belgrade.
sprawl,
And North Belgrade too.
and North Belgrade as well, right, exactly.
And the thing with, encouraging it on 27, which I think. But you have to deal with the 55-mile-an-hour speed zone. And the state regulations with your pull-offs, and it depends on what size business is going in. And, I mean, that's part of the reason why some businesses have pulled out. I mean, if you don't have a lot of traffic, then you're probably gonna be able to be all right. But if it's any type of sizable business, they're gonna have to spend millions on a pull off on the side.
Which already-
55 mile an
which
hour.
already discouraged one business from locating
Right.
there. So, and the other thing is, you know, there's, in this key, there's no commercial district because we don't have zoning. So in order to have a commercial district, you'd also have to have zoning.
So how would you pick that out?
I'm sorry.
How would you pick that zoning district out?
Well, if we were to have zoning, ultimately, the planning board would make a recommendation to the select board, who would then make a recommendation to the town.
So we're saying this person's land's more valuable than this.
No,
person's.
no, and again, I'm not,
That's exactly what you said.
no, I'm not entering into that argument, Craig. All I'm saying is that the way we currently operate, you couldn't have a commercial district in here, because you can only have a commercial district if you have zoning, and we don't have zoning.
Right.
So anyway, I'm kind of a mind that we should just stand pat and see if the state will approve what we currently have.
That was what they're right here,
Yes, sir.
and that's what we have now,
Mhm.
there's no change.
Been there for 10 years. And less than over 10 years.
Thank
And
you.
we have a 50% success rate. It's better,
Baseball, that's
it's
good.
better than Ted Williams ever batted.
Yeah, I was gonna say, baseball, it's a good batter. It's a great batter. But that's the only activity,
Now horseshoes.
yeah.
So we're gonna run with keeping the growth areas the same.
I don't know that there's a compelling reason to change it.
Yeah, I can't say that I've heard one so far.
It would be interesting to know if there's some sort of a requirement, though.
Yeah,
I think we're all curious to know that.
yeah, I'll reach out to the state tomorrow and see what that was
Good night,
about.
Kim.
Okay, so, let's talk about.
Do we like the vision statement?
I do, I think the sentences need to be attached.
Yeah, it's a little cleaner.
Periods are good. I really like the last, sentence.
That's as short as I can get it, with all that we wanted in there.
I'm not,
That's.
I'm not quibbling with the number of words, Grania. I'm just saying that, shorter sentences are better, more periods. Fewer commas, more periods.
That, do we want to power through to the public presentation, or are we gonna push it back? Knowing that it's 7 o'clock. What do you guys think? And then we also did do policies and strategies for future land use.
Much. We gotta do the thing in September, right?
We don't have to. That was just the schedule that I came up with.
Make a suggestion.
I would suggest we are nowhere near close to ready for a public participation session.
Okay,
I agree.
Just,
I seconded.
I don't wanna be harsh, but
no, but you know, I mean,
we are.
the work takes the
We
time
have
that
not
it takes.
advertised it, we have not set a.
Okay.
Um, we haven't put our survey out.
But I think what is encouraging, though, even though we feel like maybe we're not meeting, right, that deadline, is that we're having really good conversation and
Yeah.
finding out, right?
And it's an imaginary
What
deadline, that's something I
residents
just.
Think and feel, and so it helps to shape this update of the plan.
Oh, I think this has been a productive discussion. tonight, for
Does
sure.
the planning board want a editable version of the existing land use, like I did in 2003, so you can make comments and edits? Would that be easier?
A Word document, so you can make comments and edits on that.
And you break, I
Okay.
think,
Yeah,
And the same with the future land use.
Yeah, so now that we have a growth areas and a vision statement, I can finish the future land use, that's why it wasn't sent out.
Okay.
So, on to our survey? Or do we wanna,
Now, let's not worry about that tonight.
Okay.
That's for another time. We're still a few months away from our,
yeah, I think we're a couple months out,
what's your due date?
January 1st.
Sounds like a great time to have a.
I just have a question on the scheduling. Was the original plan to have us approved at town meeting in March of 25? Or no,
That is the goal,
that is the goal.
so there's.
And so by putting off the public, are we by delaying, which obviously we have to delay some, is that putting that approval in?
No, I built enough buffers in, in my, like, my own personal kind of schedule, that we're fine. So I would say, like, I'm gonna send out survey questions. I would really appreciate some feedback on those, so we can get those out this month. I think the survey needs to be out for at least 2 months. Just in all fairness for people, we can hold the public participation event while the survey is published, that they don't need to like end at the same time or
That's a
anything.
good idea.
Or is that survey being, is that a mass mailing or something, or how?
Online, buddy.
Online?
Yeah.
You don't think there'd be, bit more people if we did a mass mailing?
I know that there wouldn't be. And let me tell you why, because I did, one for my, master thesis. And I did it here in Belgrade, and everyone told me, oh, you gotta do it on paper. I was like, that's nuts. But I did some on paper. I got 102 responses back, 100 of them were online. Because,
If the town
when
wants,
was the last time you filled out a paper survey?
Yeah. but
It was the
last
census.
time, and now we're
It was-
gonna put them online.
It was the census.
if the town wants to
And
do
in fact,
paper,
the census is online now too. Thank you.
if they feel like the paper's really necessary, I want that as an option, we're just gonna have to know, it's gonna take me some time to tabulate those. It's really what that
I
would
was
be.
just asking, because a lot of people don't do online stuff.
Yeah, I agree with Greg, because you don't want to interject bias and.
You're targeting one group when you're doing.
I believe
something.
Belgrade has a
How
large
many-
elderly population.
That is true, but even the general population, 95% of them are walking around with a computer in their pocket.
So I
You're
would
the
still
exception,
support the paper
George.
event. I believe we will have paper copies of our survey, if people wanna fill it out at the public participation event. I think otherwise it's just gonna be too much.
And we could have some paper copies available here at the office.
Maybe not
So if people
advertised,
stop in, they can pick up, and
it's
we
an
could just
option.
print as needed to make them available. How about that?
I could hang out in maternity leave and counter survey questions.
Dan, did I hear that you make a motion to adjourn?
I believe I do make a motion. Did I hear a second?
Pat seconded.
Thanks for all.
We
your
are adjourned at
comments.
7:07.
Appreciate it.
I have one little tiny change.
Thank you.